The relentless rain pelted the grimy windows of the dilapidated apartment building in the heart of Chicago's South Side. Inside, in a cramped one-room dwelling, 28-year-old Jack Thompson stared at his reflection in a cracked mirror. His weathered face, etched with lines of worry and exhaustion, told the story of a man who had known nothing but struggle and disappointment. Jack's calloused hands trembled as he straightened his threadbare tie, a hand-me-down from his late father. Today was his first day as a janitor at Stonebridge Enterprises, one of the city's most prestigious financial firms. It wasn't much, but it was a chance, perhaps his last, to turn his life around. As he stepped out into the dreary morning, Jack's mind wandered to the events that had led him to this point. The death of his parents in a tragic car accident when he was just a teenager. The years spent bouncing between foster homes. The missed opportunities and broken dreams. But despite it all, Jack had never lost his inherent kindness or his unwavering belief that things could get better. Little did Jack know that this seemingly ordinary day would set in motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. The imposing glass and steel structure of Stonebridge Enterprises loomed before him, a testament to wealth and power. Jack swallowed hard, fighting back the nervousness that threatened to overwhelm him. He made his way to the employee entrance, where he was greeted by a stern-faced security guard. "Name?" the guard barked, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Jack Thompson, sir. I'm starting today as a janitor." The guard's lip curled in disdain as he looked Jack up and down. "Right. Follow me." As they walked through the opulent lobby, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the luxury surrounding him. Marble floors gleamed beneath his worn-out shoes, and priceless artworks adorned the walls. It was a world so far removed from his own that it felt like stepping onto another planet. The guard led him to a small, cluttered office where a harried-looking woman introduced herself as Mrs. Peterson, the head of housekeeping. She barely looked at Jack as she thrust a mop and bucket into his hands and rattled off a list of duties. "You'll start on the executive floor," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Remember, you're to be invisible. Don't speak unless spoken to, and for heaven's sake, don't touch anything you're not supposed to clean." Jack nodded, determined to do his best despite the less-than-warm welcome. As he made his way to the elevator, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was entering the lion's den. The executive floor was a hive of activity, with sharply dressed men and women bustling about importantly. Jack kept his head down, focusing on his work and trying to blend into the background as he'd been instructed. It was then that he heard it, a booming voice that seemed to make the very walls tremble. "Where the hell is my coffee? I swear, if I have to wait one more minute, heads are going to roll." Jack looked up to see a tall, imposing man storming out of an office at the end of the hall. His expensive suit and perfectly coiffed silver hair marked him as someone of great importance. This, Jack realized with a sinking feeling, must be Maxwell Stonebridge himself, the CEO and founder of Stonebridge Enterprises. Before Jack could look away, Stonebridge's icy blue eyes locked onto him. The older man's face contorted in disgust. "You there! What are you staring at?" Stonebridge bellowed, advancing on Jack with purposeful strides. Jack's heart raced as he fumbled for words. I am sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to what? Gawk like some slack-jawed idiot?" Stonebridge sneered. "Who let this riffraff in here anyway?" "I'm the new janitor, sir," Jack managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Stonebridge's eyes narrowed. "A janitor? Well, isn't that fitting? Tell me, boy, do you enjoy wallowing in filth? Is that why you chose such a noble profession?" The word stung, but Jack forced himself to remain calm. "It's honest work, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity." This seemed to amuse Stonebridge. He turned to the gathering crowd of employees, who had stopped to watch the spectacle. "Did you hear that, everyone? He's grateful. Well, allow me to express my gratitude for your service. With a cruel smirk, Stonebridge knocked over a nearby potted plant, sending soil spilling across the pristine floor. There you go, janitor. Something for you to be thankful for. Clean it up. Laughter rippled through the onlookers as Jack knelt to clean up the mess, his cheeks burning with humiliation. But even as he fought back tears of anger and shame, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that this job was his lifeline. He couldn't afford to lose it, no matter how cruel his employer might be. As Jack worked, he became aware of a pair of eyes watching him intently. He glanced up to see a young woman standing apart from the crowd, her expression a mixture of sympathy and something else, curiosity, perhaps? She was strikingly beautiful, with long chestnut hair and warm brown eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. But it was the kindness in her gaze that caught Jack off guard. In this den of wolves, she seemed like a beacon of humanity. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Jack felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. But before he could process what had happened, she was gone, swept away by the dispersing crowd as Stonebridge barked at everyone to get back to work. Little did Jack know that this fleeting encounter would be the first thread in a tapestry of events that would ultimately lead to the unraveling of Stonebridge's carefully constructed world of power and privilege. As the days turned into weeks, Jack settled into a routine at Stonebridge Enterprises. He arrived early each morning, worked tirelessly throughout the day, and left long after most of the employees had gone home. Despite the constant stream of humiliation and degradation he faced, particularly from Maxwell Stonebridge, Jack refused to let his spirit be broken. He found small moments of joy in his work, the satisfaction of a job well done, the quiet beauty of the city skyline as he cleaned the windows at dusk, and the occasional kind word from some of the lower-level employees who had come to appreciate his diligence and unfailing politeness. But it was the mysterious young woman he had seen on that first day who occupied his thoughts most often. He caught glimpses of her from time to time, always from afar, always too brief for him to do more than wonder about her identity and her role in the company. One evening, as Jack was emptying trash bins in the deserted office, he overheard raised voices coming from Stonebridge's private conference room. Curiosity got the better of him, and he inched closer to the partially open door. "Dad, you can't keep treating people like this." It was a woman's voice, one that sounded oddly familiar. "The way you spoke to that janitor the other day was completely unacceptable." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Could it be her? "Oh, spare me your bleeding heart nonsense, Olivia," Stonebridge's gruff voice replied. "That man should be grateful I even allow him in the building. People like him are a dime a dozen, replaceable, forgettable." "But that's exactly the problem," Olivia shot back. "You've lost touch with reality, Dad. These are real people with real lives, not just numbers on a spreadsheet." There was a heavy sigh, then Stonebridge spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "Listen to me very carefully, young lady. I built this company from nothing. I clawed my way to the top through sheer will and determination. If I choose to remind the little people of their place, that's my prerogative. And if you ever want to take over this company someday, you do well to remember that." Jack heard footsteps approaching and quickly ducked into a nearby supply closet. His mind was reeling from what he had just heard. The kind-eyed woman was Olivia Stonebridge, daughter of the very man who seemed to take such pleasure in tormenting him. And yet, she had defended him, a lowly janitor she had never even spoken to. As he made his way home that night, Jack's thoughts were a jumble of confusion and conflicting emotions. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the Stonebridge family dynamic than met the eye. And despite his better judgment, he found himself drawn to the enigmatic Olivia, wondering what other secrets lay hidden behind the gleaming facade of Stonebridge Enterprises. Little did Jack know that fate was about to throw him headlong into a web of intrigue, betrayal, and unexpected alliances that would test his resilience and change the course of his life forever. The following week brought with it a flurry of activity at Stonebridge Enterprises. Rumors swirled about a major merger on the horizon, and the tension in the office was palpable. Jack kept his head down and focused on his work, but he couldn't help noticing the increased number of closed-door meetings and hushed conversations in the hallways. One particularly late night, as Jack was finishing up his rounds, he found himself alone on the executive floor. The eerie silence was broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the streets below. As he approached Maxwell Stonebridge's office to empty the trash, Jack noticed a sliver of light spilling out from under the door. Voices drifted out, one unmistakably Stonebridge's, the other unfamiliar and gruff. "Are you sure about this, Max?" the unknown voice asked. "If word gets out about what we're doing, it could ruin everything." Stonebridge's reply was cold and calculated. "Don't be a coward, Jenkins. We've come too far to back out now. Once this merger goes through, we'll be untouchable. A few sacrifices along the way are a small price to pay." Jack's blood ran cold. He knew he shouldn't be listening, but something told him that what he was hearing was of utmost importance. "And what about your daughter?" Jenkins pressed. "Olivia's been asking too many questions. If she finds out..." "Leave Olivia to me," Stonebridge snapped. "She may be idealistic, but she's not stupid. She knows which side her bread is buttered on." The conversation continued, filled with cryptic references to offshore accounts, falsified documents, and something called Project Phoenix. Jack's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was hearing. It was clear that whatever Stonebridge was involved in, it was far from legal. Suddenly, the voices grew louder, moving towards the door. In a panic, Jack ducked into a nearby storage closet, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it would give him away. Through a crack in the door, he watched as Stonebridge and a portly, balding man he assumed was Jenkins exited the office. They paused for a moment, their faces grave. "Remember, Max," Jenkins said in a low voice. "If this gets out, we're both finished. Make sure those files are secure." Stonebridge nodded curtly. "Don't worry. They're locked away where no one will ever find them. Now go home and get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." As the two men walked away, Jack let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His mind was reeling from what he had just witnessed. Maxwell Stonebridge, the man who had humiliated and belittled him at every turn, was involved in something deeply corrupt, possibly even criminal. For a brief, dark moment, Jack considered the possibility of using this information for his own gain. He could blackmail Stonebridge, force him to treat him with respect, maybe even get a better position in the company. But as quickly as the thought came, he dismissed it. That wasn't who he was. His parents had raised him better than that. No, he needed to do the right thing. But what exactly was the right thing? Going to the police seemed like the obvious choice, but without concrete evidence, it would be his word against that of one of the most powerful men in Chicago. As Jack made his way home that night, the weight of his newfound knowledge pressed down on him like a physical burden. He knew that whatever he decided to do next would have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for everyone connected to Stonebridge Enterprises. Little did he know that his decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the corporate world and force him to confront not only the demons of his past, but also the unexpected twists of his future. The next morning, Jack arrived at work earlier than usual, his mind still churning with the revelations of the previous night. As he methodically went about his cleaning duties, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was now carrying a ticking time bomb of information. Lost in thought, he didn't notice the approach of hurried footsteps until a soft voice startled him out of his reverie. "Excuse me?" Jack looked up, his heart skipping a beat as he found himself face to face with Olivia Stonebridge. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he had remembered, but it was the genuine warmth in her eyes that truly captivated him. "Why yes, Miss Stonebridge," he stammered, suddenly acutely aware of his shabby uniform and the mop in his hands. Olivia smiled, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I don't know your name." "It's Jack. Jack Thompson." "Jack," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I've been meaning to speak with you for a while now. I wanted to apologize for my father's behavior. The way he treated you that day, it was unacceptable." Jack was taken aback by her sincerity. "That's very kind of you, Miss Stonebridge, but you don't need to apologize for your father's actions." Olivia's expression darkened slightly. "Perhaps not, but I feel responsible nonetheless. My father's treatment of the staff here has been a point of contention between us for some time." There was a moment of charged silence between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Jack found himself wanting to tell her everything he had overheard, to warn her about her father's nefarious dealings. But fear and uncertainty held him back. "Jack," Olivia said suddenly, her voice lowered, "I know this might sound strange, but have you noticed anything unusual happening around here lately? Anything out of the ordinary?" The question caught Jack off guard. Could she suspect something was amiss as well? He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a booming voice echoed down the hallway. "Olivia! What are you doing talking to the help?" Maxwell Stonebridge strode towards them, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Jack instinctively took a step back, bracing himself for another onslaught of humiliation. But Olivia stood her ground, her chin raised defiantly. "I was just thanking Jack for his hard work, Father. Something you could stand to do more often." Stonebridge's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I pay him to do a job, not to engage in idle chit-chat. Now, if you're quite finished, we have a board meeting to attend." With a final withering glare at Jack, Stonebridge turned on his heel and stalked away. Olivia lingered for a moment, an apology written across her features. "I'm sorry, Jack. I have to go, but please, if you ever need anything or if you see anything strange, don't hesitate to let me know." As she hurried after her father, Jack was left with a whirlwind of emotions. The encounter had only deepened his internal conflict. On one hand, he now had a potential ally in Olivia. On the other, the stakes seemed higher than ever. Throughout the day, Jack found himself hyper-aware of his surroundings, noticing details he had previously overlooked. The nervous glances exchanged between executives, the increased security presence, the late-night deliveries of unmarked boxes, it all painted a picture of a company on the brink of something monumental. And based on what he had overheard, Jack was certain it wasn't anything good. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pristine floors of Stonebridge Enterprises, Jack made his way to the executive floor for his final round of cleaning. The offices were nearly deserted, with only a few workaholics still hunched over their desks, bathed in the blue glow of computer screens. He was just about to start mopping when a commotion from Maxwell Stonebridge's office caught his attention. The door flew open, and out stormed Olivia, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this, Dad," she shouted, her usual composure shattered. "Do you have any idea how many people's lives you're going to ruin?" Stonebridge appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, grabbing Olivia's arm. "This is none of your concern. Go home and let the adults handle this." Olivia wrenched her arm free, her eyes blazing. "I won't be a part of this. And I won't let you destroy everything our family has built on lies and greed." With that, she turned on her heel and strode towards the elevator, leaving her father seething in her wake. As she passed Jack, their eyes met for a brief moment. The pain and conflict he saw there made his heart ache. Stonebridge noticed Jack then, his face contorting with rage. "What are you staring at, Janitor?" Get back to work before I have you thrown out of this building." Jack quickly averted his gaze and resumed his mopping, his mind racing. Whatever was happening, it was clear that Olivia was not on board with her father's plans. Could she be an ally in exposing the truth? As he worked, Jack's ears pricked up at the sound of hushed voices coming from Stonebridge's office. He inched closer, straining to hear. "Need to accelerate the timeline," Stonebridge was saying. "Olivia's becoming a liability. We move everything offshore tonight, understand? And make sure those incriminating files are destroyed. No loose ends." Jack's blood ran cold. He had to do something, and fast. But what? He was just a janitor, with no proof and no power. Who would believe him? As if in answer to his silent plea, fate intervened. In his haste to leave, Stonebridge knocked over a stack of papers on his desk. A single sheet fluttered to the ground, landing just outside the office door. Jack's heart pounded as he bent to retrieve it, his eyes quickly scanning the document. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. It was a memo detailing the illegal transfer of funds, complete with account numbers and dates. This was the evidence he needed. With trembling hands, Jack folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. He had no idea what he was going to do with it, but he knew he couldn't let Stonebridge destroy all the evidence of his crimes. As he finished his shift and made his way out of the building, Jack felt as though he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The cool night air did little to calm his racing thoughts. He was so distracted that he almost didn't notice the sleek black car parked across the street, or the figure leaning against it. "Jack?" He startled at the sound of his name, whirling around to find Olivia Stonebridge watching him intently. She looked different now, away from the polished halls of Stonebridge Enterprises. More vulnerable, somehow. More human. "Miss Stonebridge," he stammered, suddenly acutely aware of the incriminating document burning a hole in his pocket. "What are you doing here?" Olivia took a step closer, her eyes searching his face. "I think you know something, Jack. Something about what my father is up to. And I think you want to do the right thing, just like I do." Jack hesitated, torn between his instinct to trust Olivia and the fear of what might happen if he was wrong about her. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw the same determination and kindness that had first drawn him to her. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "You're right," he said quietly. "I do know something. And I have proof." Olivia's eyes widened. "Get in the car," she said urgently. "We need to talk somewhere safe." As Jack slid into the passenger seat of Olivia's luxury sedan, he couldn't help but marvel at the turn his life had taken. Just hours ago, he had been nothing more than a nameless janitor, invisible to the likes of Olivia Stonebridge. Now, he was sitting beside her, about to embark on a journey that could bring down one of the most powerful men in Chicago. They drove in tense silence for several minutes, the city lights blurring past the windows. Finally, Olivia pulled into a secluded parking lot overlooking Lake Michigan. The vast expanse of dark water stretched out before them, a fitting backdrop for the weighty conversation to come. Olivia turned to face Jack, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "Tell me everything," she said softly. And so, Jack did. He recounted the conversation he had overheard between Stonebridge and Jenkins, the cryptic references to offshore accounts and Project Phoenix. He told her about the increased security, the late-night deliveries, and finally, he pulled out the document he had taken from Stonebridge's office. Olivia's hands shook as she read the memo, her face growing paler with each line. "Oh, God," she whispered. "It's worse than I thought. He's been embezzling funds for years, using shell companies to hide the money. And this merger, it's just a cover to pull off his biggest heist yet." Jack watched her, a mixture of admiration and concern welling up inside him. "What are you going to do?" he asked gently. Olivia looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "What we're going to do, Jack. We're in this together now. We have to stop him." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Jack knew that by agreeing to help her, he was putting everything on the line, his job, his safety, perhaps even his life. But as he looked at Olivia, he realized that he had never wanted anything more than to stand beside her and fight for what was right. "Okay," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "Where do we start?" A small smile tugged at the corners of Olivia's mouth. "We need more evidence. Concrete proof that will stand up in court. And I think I know where to find it." She started the car, her movements filled with a new sense of purpose. "There's a safe in my father's home office. I've always suspected that's where he keeps his most sensitive documents. If we can get into it, we'll have everything we need to bring him down." Jack's eyes widened. "Break into your father's house? Isn't that illegal?" Olivia's laugh was tinged with bitterness. "Probably. But considering what he's done, I think we can afford to bend the rules a little. Besides, it's still my home. I have every right to be there." As they drove through the quiet streets of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhood, Jack couldn't help but feel like he had stepped into another world. The mansions that lined the streets were larger than any building he had ever lived in, each one a testament to wealth and power he could scarcely imagine. Olivia pulled up to a gated driveway, punching in a code that made the massive iron gates swing open silently. The Stonebridge mansion loomed before them, a sprawling edifice of stone and glass that seemed to touch the sky. "Home sweet home," Olivia muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She turned to Jack, her expression serious. "Are you sure you want to do this? There's no going back once we're inside." Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I'm sure. Whatever happens, we're in this together." They made their way quietly through the darkened house, Jack marveling at the opulence surrounding him. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, and the plush carpets muffled their footsteps as they climbed the grand staircase to the second floor. Olivia led him to a heavy wooden door at the end of a long hallway. "This is it," she whispered, producing a key from her pocket. "My father's sanctuary. No one is allowed in here but him." The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside, closing the door behind them. Jack's eyes widened as he took in the room. It was like stepping into a museum of wealth and power. Rare books lined the shelves, and a massive desk dominated the center of the room. But it was the painting behind the desk that caught his attention, a larger-than-life portrait of Maxwell Stonebridge himself, his cold eyes seeming to follow them as they moved. Olivia went straight to the painting, her fingers searching the ornate frame. With a soft click, the entire thing swung forward on hidden hinges, revealing a state-of-the-art safe built into the wall. "Impressive," Jack murmured. Olivia nodded grimly. "My father always did have a flair for the dramatic. Now comes the tricky part. We need to crack this safe." For the next hour, they worked in tense silence, Olivia trying combination after combination while Jack kept watch at the door. Just as they were about to give up hope, there was a satisfying click, and the safe door swung open. "We did it!" Olivia exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. But their elation was short-lived. As they began to rifle through the documents inside, the unmistakable sound of a key in the front door echoed through the house. Jack's blood ran cold. "Someone's here," he whispered urgently. Panic flashed across Olivia's face, but she quickly composed herself. "Quick, help me gather everything. We need to get out of here." They shoved documents and USB drives into Olivia's bag as quickly as they could, their hearts pounding in unison. Just as they were replacing the painting, they heard footsteps on the stairs. "Hide!" Olivia hissed, pushing Jack towards a heavy curtain in the corner of the room. Jack had barely concealed himself when the office door swung open. Through a tiny gap in the fabric, he watched as Maxwell Stonebridge himself strode into the room, followed closely by the man Jack recognized as Jenkins. "Are you sure about this, Max?" Jenkins was saying, his voice tinged with nervousness. "If anyone finds out what we're planning..." Stonebridge waved a dismissive hand. "No one will find out. By this time tomorrow, we'll be on a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty, and Stonebridge Enterprises will be nothing but a smoldering ruin. A tragic accident, of course. No one will ever suspect a thing." Jack's mind reeled at the implications of what he was hearing. Not only was Stonebridge planning to steal millions, but he was going to destroy the entire company, and likely countless lives along with it, to cover his tracks. He glanced at Olivia, hidden behind the desk, and saw the horror etched on her face. She had gone deathly pale, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What about your daughter?" Jenkins pressed. "Olivia's been asking too many questions." "Are you sure she won't be a problem?" Stonebridge's laugh was cold and empty. "Olivia? That naive little girl is too caught up in her ridiculous notions of right and wrong to ever be a real threat. Besides, once we're gone, she'll have no choice but to accept what's happened and move on. She might even thank me one day, once she realizes how much better off she is without the burden of running a company." Jack felt a surge of anger at Stonebridge's callous words. How could a father speak about his own daughter with such contempt? He wanted nothing more than to step out from behind the curtain and confront the man, to defend Olivia's honor and expose his heinous plans. But he knew that would be suicide. They needed to get out of there with the evidence they had gathered and find a way to stop Stonebridge before it was too late. As if reading his thoughts, Olivia chose that moment to make her move. With a grace born of desperation, she slipped out from behind the desk and edged towards the door, her movements silent and fluid. Jack held his breath, willing her to make it. Just a few more steps. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Olivia reached for the doorknob, her bag caught on the edge of a nearby bookshelf, sending a heavy volume crashing to the floor. The room fell deathly silent. Then, Stonebridge's voice, low and dangerous, "Who's there?" Olivia froze, her eyes wide with terror. In that moment, Jack knew he had to act. Without thinking, he burst out from behind the curtain, placing himself between Olivia and the two startled men. "Run," he shouted to Olivia, who didn't need to be told twice. She bolted from the room, the bag of evidence clutched tightly to her chest. Stonebridge's face contorted with rage as he recognized Jack. "You," he roared. "I should have known a worthless janitor like you would be behind this." He lunged forward, but Jack was quicker. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he shoved the massive desk, sending it careening into Stonebridge and Jenkins. The two men stumbled, giving Jack the opening he needed to make his escape. He tore down the hallway, his heart pounding in his ears. He could hear Stonebridge's enraged shouts behind him, spurring him to run faster than he ever had in his life. At the bottom of the stairs, Olivia was waiting for him, her face a mask of determination. "Come on," she cried, grabbing his hand and pulling him towards the door. They burst out into the cool night air, sprinting across the manicured lawn towards Olivia's car. The sound of pursuit was close behind them, but adrenaline fueled their flight. Olivia fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking. "Hurry!" Jack urged, glancing back to see Stonebridge and Jenkins emerging from the house. The engine roared to life just as Stonebridge reached them, his face purple with rage. He slammed his fists on the hood of the car, but Olivia was already peeling out of the driveway, tires screeching on the pavement. As they sped away into the night, Jack allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He looked over at Olivia, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Tears glistened in her eyes, but there was a fierce determination in the set of her jaw. Jack reached out and placed his hand over hers, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "We did it," he said. "We got the evidence. Now we can stop him." Olivia took a shaky breath, then turned to him with a small smile. "We're not out of the woods yet," she said. "But you're right. We have a chance now. Thank you, Jack, for everything." As they drove through the darkened streets of Chicago, the weight of what they had done, and what still lay ahead, settled over them. They had taken on one of the most powerful men in the city and lived to tell the tale. But the real battle was just beginning. With the evidence safely in their possession and the truth of Stonebridge's crimes finally exposed, Jack and Olivia knew that their lives would never be the same. They had become unlikely allies in a fight for justice, bound together by a shared determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, Jack and Olivia exchanged a look of grim resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The poor janitor and the wealthy heiress, united in their quest to bring a corrupt empire to its knees and perhaps, in the process, find something neither of them had been looking for, a connection that transcended class and circumstance, forged in the fires of adversity and mutual respect. Olivia guided the car through the awakening streets of Chicago, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. "We need to go somewhere safe," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Somewhere my father won't think to look for us." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the streets warily for any sign of pursuit. "I might know a place," he said after a moment's hesitation. "It's not much, but it's off the grid. An old friend of my father's has a cabin just outside the city. I don't think anyone knows about it except me." Olivia shot him a grateful look. "That sounds perfect. Can you give me directions?" As they made their way out of the city, the adrenaline of their escape began to wear off, leaving them both exhausted and on edge. The weight of the evidence in Olivia's bag seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile, a tangible reminder of the enormous task that lay ahead of them. The cabin, when they finally reached it, was little more than a weathered shack nestled in a small clearing. It was a far cry from the opulent Stonebridge mansion, but to Jack and Olivia, it might as well have been a fortress. "It's not much," Jack said apologetically as they stepped inside, "but it should keep us hidden for a while." Olivia looked around the sparse interior, a small kitchenette, a worn couch, and a rickety table with two mismatched chairs. Despite its humble appearance, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Thank you, Jack." They set about making the cabin as secure as possible, drawing the tattered curtains and ensuring all the windows and doors were locked. Once they were satisfied that they were as safe as they could be, they turned their attention to the evidence they had risked everything to obtain. Olivia emptied the contents of her bag onto the table, stacks of documents, USB drives, and a small leather-bound ledger that looked particularly promising. "We need to go through all of this," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to understand exactly what my father has been up to and find a way to prove it beyond any doubt." Jack nodded, pulling up one of the chairs. "Where do we start?" For the next several hours, they pored over the documents, piecing together the intricate web of deceit and corruption that Maxwell Stonebridge had woven. The more they uncovered, the more staggering the scope of his crimes became. "It's not just embezzlement," Olivia said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "He's been manipulating the market, insider trading, even blackmailing other executives to keep them in line. And this merger, it's all a front. He's planning to drain the company's assets and leave thousands of people jobless." Jack felt a surge of righteous anger. "We can't let him get away with this," he said firmly. But how do we stop him? He's got connections everywhere, the police, the media, probably even some judges. Who can we trust? Olivia was silent for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then, her eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. I think I know someone who might be able to help us, she said. An old family friend, Sarah Callahan. She's an investigative journalist with the Chicago Tribune. If we can get this evidence to her, she'll know how to use it. Jack nodded slowly, considering the idea. It's risky, he said. If your father finds out we've gone to the press. I know, Olivia said grimly. But we're out of options. We need to act fast, before he has a chance to cover his tracks or worse, follow through with his plan to destroy the company. As they debated their next move, a sudden noise outside made them both freeze. The unmistakable sound of tires on gravel, followed by car doors slamming. Jack moved quickly to the window, peering cautiously through a gap in the curtains. His heart sank at what he saw. We've got company, he said urgently. 2 black SUVs. Looks like your father's security team. Olivia's face paled. How did they find us so quickly? It doesn't matter, Jack said, already gathering up the evidence and shoving it back into Olivia's bag. We need to get out of here. Now. They moved swiftly, years of practice making Jack silent and efficient, while Olivia followed his lead, her heart pounding in her chest. They slipped out the back door just as they heard the sound of the front door being kicked in. The woods behind the cabin were dense, offering them cover as they fled deeper into the forest. They could hear shouts behind them, the beam of flashlights cutting through the early morning gloom. This way, Jack whispered, guiding Olivia along a barely visible path. His years of childhood exploration in these woods were finally paying off. They ran for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. Finally, when Jack was sure they had lost their trackers, he allowed them to slow to a stop, both of them gasping for breath. What now? Olivia panted, leaning against a tree for support. Jack's mind raced, weighing their limited options. We need to get back to the city, he said finally. Find a way to contact your journalist friend. It's our only chance. Olivia nodded, her face set with determination despite her exhaustion. Okay. Let's go. As they made their way carefully through the woods, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the turn his life had taken. Just days ago, he had been nothing more than a nameless janitor, invisible to the likes of Olivia Stonebridge. Now, he was on the run with her, caught up in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse that could bring down one of Chicago's most powerful men. He glanced at Olivia, taking in her disheveled appearance, designer clothes now torn and muddy, her usually perfect hair a tangled mess. Yet there was a fire in her eyes that spoke of an inner strength he had never seen before. In that moment, he realized that he would follow her anywhere, face any danger, to see this through to the end. As they emerged from the woods onto a quiet country road, the sun was climbing higher in the sky. They were miles from anywhere, with no transportation and no way to contact help. But they had each other, and the truth burning a hole in Olivia's bag. It would have to be enough. We should try to find a payphone, Olivia suggested, her voice hoarse from their flight through the woods. I can call Sarah, let her know what's happening. Jack nodded, scanning the empty road. Good idea. But we need to be careful. Your father's men could be anywhere. They set off down the road, staying close to the tree line in case they needed to take cover quickly. The morning was warming up, the humidity rising with the sun, and soon they were both sweating and footsore. After what felt like miles, they spotted a small gas station in the distance. Hope surged through them, giving new energy to their tired legs. As they approached, Jack held out a hand to stop Olivia. Wait here, he said. I'll check it out first. We can't risk being seen together if anyone's looking for us. Olivia wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She watched anxiously from the cover of the trees as Jack made his way to the gas station, trying to look as casual as possible despite his disheveled appearance. The station was deserted except for a bored-looking attendant behind the counter. Jack breathed a sigh of relief when he spotted an old payphone at the side of the building. He bought a bottle of water and some snacks, then made his way to the phone. His hand shook slightly as he dialed the number Olivia had given him for Sarah Callahan. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Jack's heart sank with each unanswered ring. Finally, on the 6th ring, a sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Sarah Callahan?" Jack said urgently. "My name is Jack Thompson. I'm a friend of Olivia Stonebridge. We need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Sarah's voice came back, suddenly alert. "What's going on? Is Olivia okay?" Jack glanced around nervously, lowering his voice. "She's fine, but we're in trouble. We have evidence of serious crimes committed by Maxwell Stonebridge. We need to get it to you, but we're being chased. Can you help us?" Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. "Of course. Where are you?" Jack gave her a rough idea of their location, and Sarah promised to meet them in an hour at a nearby diner. "Be careful," she warned. "If what you're saying is true, Stonebridge won't hesitate to silence you both." As Jack hung up the phone, he felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had an ally now, someone who could help them expose the truth. But they still had to make it to the meeting without being caught. He hurried back to where Olivia was waiting, quickly filling her in on the conversation with Sarah. "We need to get moving," he said, handing her the water and snacks. "It's about 5 miles to the diner where we're meeting her." Olivia nodded, her face set with determination. "Let's go." As they set off down the road, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every passing car made him tense, expecting Stonebridge's men to come roaring up at any moment. But hour after hour passed without incident, and eventually, the diner came into view. It was a small, nondescript place, the kind of roadside eatery that catered to truckers and locals. As they approached, Jack spotted a woman sitting alone in a booth by the window, her eyes scanning the parking lot warily. "That must be Sarah," Olivia said, recognizing her father's old friend despite the years that had passed since they'd last met. They entered the diner cautiously, sliding into the booth across from Sarah. The journalist's eyes widened as she took in their bedraggled appearance. "My God, Olivia," she breathed. "What have you gotten yourself into?" Olivia's laugh was tinged with hysteria. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." She glanced at Jack, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Sarah, this is Jack. He's the reason we're here. He helped me uncover the truth about my father." Sarah's sharp eyes took in Jack's worn clothing and calloused hands. "A janitor," she said, not unkindly. "Stonebridge never did pay attention to the little people. His mistake." Jack nodded, feeling a surge of pride at her words. "We have evidence," he said, keeping his voice low. "Documents, financial records, everything you need to prove what Stonebridge has been doing." Olivia pulled out a USB drive from her bag, sliding it across the table to Sarah. "It's all here," she said. "Every dirty deal, every manipulated market, every life he's ruined in pursuit of more power and wealth." Sarah pocketed the drive, her expression grim. "This is big, Olivia. Bigger than anything I've ever worked on. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? Once this story breaks, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same." Olivia reached across the table, taking Jack's hand in hers. The gesture was so natural, so right, that it took his breath away. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "We both are. My father needs to be stopped, no matter the cost." Sarah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "All right then. I'll need a few days to go through all of this, to verify everything and put together an airtight story. In the meantime, you two need to stay hidden. I have a friend with a safe house just outside the city. I'll take you there now." As they left the diner, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a point of no return. The next few days would determine not just their fate, but the fate of thousands of innocent people whose lives hung in the balance. The safe house turned out to be a modest apartment in a nondescript building on the outskirts of Chicago. It was small but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room dominated by a wall of computers and monitoring equipment. "My friend is a bit of a paranoid tech genius," Sarah explained as she showed them around. "But his paranoia might just save your lives. This place is completely off the grid. No one will find you here." As Sarah prepared to leave, she turned to Jack and Olivia with a serious expression. "I can't stress enough how dangerous this situation is," she said. "Stonebridge has resources we can't even imagine. He'll stop at nothing to keep this story from breaking. You need to stay here, stay quiet, and most importantly, stay alive. I'll be in touch as soon as I have something." With that, she was gone, leaving Jack and Olivia alone in the sudden silence of the apartment. They stood there for a moment, the weight of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, Olivia broke the silence with a shaky laugh. "Well," she said, gesturing to the sparse surroundings, "it's not exactly the Ritz, but I guess it's home for now." Jack couldn't help but smile at her attempt at humor. "Hey, it's a step up from that cabin in the woods. At least we have running water here." They spent the next few hours settling in, taking turns showering and changing into the clean clothes Sarah had provided. As night fell, they found themselves sitting side by side on the small couch, the events of the past few days finally catching up with them. "I still can't believe this is happening," Olivia said softly, her eyes distant. "My whole life, I thought I knew who my father was. I thought I knew what our family stood for. How could I have been so blind?" Jack reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture was becoming familiar, a source of comfort for both of them. "You weren't blind," he said gently. "You saw the good in him because that's who you are. You always look for the best in people. It's one of the things I admire most about you." Olivia turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you, Jack. For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Jack felt his heart racing, acutely aware of how close they were sitting. He could see every fleck of gold in Olivia's hazel eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath on his skin. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they leaned towards each other. Jack's hand came up to cup Olivia's cheek, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped. Their lips were just inches apart. Suddenly, a loud beeping sound shattered the moment. They jumped apart, startled, as one of the computers on the wall lit up with an urgent message. "Proximity alert," Jack read, his heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. "Someone's approaching the building." Olivia was on her feet in an instant, peering at the security camera feeds. "There," she said, pointing to a screen showing the street outside. 2 black SUVs. Just like the ones at the cabin. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "They've found us. We need to get out of here. Now." They moved quickly, grabbing the few possessions they had and heading for the door. But as Jack reached for the handle, he hesitated. "Wait," he said, a plan forming in his mind. We can't just run. They'll keep chasing us, and eventually, they'll catch us. We need to end this. Tonight. Olivia looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. What are you thinking? Jack took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to propose was incredibly risky. We go to Stonebridge Enterprises. Tonight. We confront your father, record his confession, and end this once and for all. For a moment, Olivia stared at Jack in disbelief, her mind racing to process his audacious plan. The sound of car doors slamming outside snapped her back to reality. Are you insane? She hissed, her eyes darting between Jack and the security feeds. We'd be walking right into the lion's den. Jack gripped her shoulders gently, his eyes blazing with determination. Think about it, Olivia. Your father doesn't know we have the evidence. He thinks we're just running scared. If we confront him now, catch him off guard, we might be able to get him to incriminate himself. Olivia bit her lip, considering. The approaching footsteps in the hallway outside made the decision for her. Okay, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's do it. But how do we get out of here? Jack's eyes scanned the room, landing on a window that led to the fire escape. There, he said, already moving. We can climb down and slip away before they even realize we were here. They moved swiftly, Jack easing the window open as quietly as possible. The cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city. Jack climbed out first, helping Olivia navigate the narrow metal steps. Just as they reached the bottom, they heard the crash of the apartment door being broken down. Without a word, they took off running, ducking into the shadows of a nearby alley. We need transportation, Olivia panted as they paused to catch their breath. Something they won't be looking for. Jack nodded, his mind racing. Then, he spotted it, an old delivery truck parked at the end of the alley, its driver nowhere in sight. There, he said, already moving towards it. It's not pretty, but it'll get us to Stonebridge Enterprises. Years of living on the edge of poverty had taught Jack a thing or two about hot-wiring cars. Within minutes, they were pulling away from the curb, the truck's engine sputtering to life. As they navigated the late-night streets of Chicago, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the surreal turn his life had taken. Here he was, a former janitor, about to confront one of the most powerful men in the city, with the man's daughter by his side. If someone had told him a week ago that this would be his reality, he would have laughed in their face. Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts. Jack, she said softly, before we do this, I need you to know something. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. No matter what happens tonight, I don't regret any of it. Meeting you, uncovering the truth, it's opened my eyes to a world I never truly saw before. You've shown me what real courage and integrity look like. Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. He reached over, taking her hand in his. Olivia, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You could have turned a blind eye to all of this, could have lived in comfort and luxury. But you chose to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. I'm honored to be by your side. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights blurring past. As they approached the towering silhouette of Stonebridge Enterprises, Jack felt a mix of anticipation and dread coiling in his stomach. How are we going to get in? Olivia asked as they parked a block away from the building. Security will be tight, especially at this hour. Jack smiled, a plan already forming in his mind. Leave that to me. I may have been just a janitor, but I know this building better than anyone. There's a service entrance in the back that's only used for late-night deliveries. With any luck, it'll be our way in. They moved silently through the shadows, Jack leading the way with the confidence of someone who had walked these paths 1,000 times before. As they approached the service entrance, Jack held up a hand, signaling Olivia to wait. He crept forward, examining the keypad by the door. With a grin, he punched in a code, and to Olivia's amazement, the door clicked open. "How did you?" she began, but Jack just shook his head. "You'd be surprised what people say around the guy pushing the mop," he said with a wink. "Now come on, we don't have much time." They slipped inside, the familiar smell of industrial cleaners and stale coffee filling Jack's nostrils. He led them through a maze of corridors and service elevators, deftly avoiding the night security patrols. As they emerged onto the executive floor, Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This was it. The moment of truth. Olivia's hand found his, squeezing tightly. "Ready?" she whispered. Jack nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Ready." They approached Maxwell Stonebridge's office, the heavy oak door looming before them like the entrance to a dragon's lair. To their surprise, a sliver of light shone from beneath the door. Jack and Olivia exchanged a look. Stonebridge was here, working late into the night. Perhaps fate was on their side after all. Taking a deep breath, Olivia raised her hand and knocked firmly on the door. "What is it now?" Stonebridge's irritated voice called from within. "I told you I'm not to be disturbed." Olivia pushed the door open, her head held high. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The look of shock on Maxwell Stonebridge's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. He rose from his desk, his face quickly morphing from surprise to anger. "Olivia? What the hell are you doing here?" His eyes landed on Jack, narrowing dangerously. "And you. The janitor. I should have known you were behind this." Jack stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Olivia. "It's over, Mr. Stonebridge," he said, his voice calmer than he felt. "We know everything. The embezzlement, the market manipulation, the plans to destroy the company. It's all going to come out." Stonebridge's laugh was cold and humorless. "You think you can threaten me? In my own office? You have no idea who you're dealing with, boy." "Oh, I think we do," Olivia said, pulling out her phone. She hit a button, and suddenly the room was filled with Stonebridge's own voice, detailing his plans to Jenkins on that fateful night in his home office. The color drained from Stonebridge's face as he listened to the damning evidence. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was deafening. "Where did you get that?" Stonebridge whispered, his composure cracking for the first time. "It doesn't matter," Jack said firmly. "What matters is that we have it, along with a mountain of other evidence. Financial records, emails, everything. It's over, Mr. Stonebridge. You've lost." For a moment, it seemed as though Stonebridge might lunge at them. His hands clenched into fists, his face contorted with rage. But then, something seemed to break inside him. He slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Why, Olivia?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this to me? To our family?" Olivia stepped forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Because it was the right thing to do, Father. Because the man who raised me, who taught me about integrity and honor, would have wanted me to stand up for what's right." "What happened to that man, Dad? When did money and power become more important than everything else?" Stonebridge looked up at his daughter, and for a brief moment, Jack saw a flicker of the man Olivia had once known, a father who had loved his daughter, who had wanted to make the world a better place. I don't know," Stonebridge said, his voice breaking. "Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really mattered. I convinced myself that the ends justified the means, that I was building something greater than myself. But in the process, I lost everything that truly mattered." He turned to Jack, his expression a mix of resignation and grudging respect. "And you, Mr. Thompson. I underestimated you. I saw only a janitor, someone beneath my notice. But you've proven to be a far better man than I ever was." Jack felt a surge of emotion at Stonebridge's words. Not triumph or satisfaction, but a deep, profound sadness for the man before him, a man who had had everything and had thrown it all away in pursuit of more. "It's not too late, Mr. Stonebridge," Jack said softly. "You can still make this right. Turn yourself in, cooperate with the authorities. Use your resources to help the people you've hurt. It won't erase what you've done, but it's a start." Stonebridge looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right," he said. He reached for his phone, his hand shaking slightly. "I'll call my lawyers. And the SEC. It's time to face the music." As Stonebridge made his calls, Jack and Olivia stepped out of the office, both of them feeling drained but oddly exhilarated. They had done it. They had brought down a corrupt empire and paved the way for justice to be served. "What happens now?" Jack asked softly, turning to Olivia. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that took his breath away. Now we rebuild. We make things right. And we do it together." In that moment, standing in the quiet hallway of Stonebridge Enterprises, Jack realized that his life had changed irrevocably. He was no longer just a janitor, invisible and overlooked. He was a man who had made a difference, who had stood up for what was right against impossible odds. And as he looked at Olivia, he saw not the wealthy heiress he had once perceived her to be, but a partner, an equal, someone who had seen past his circumstances to the person he truly was. Slowly, tentatively, they leaned towards each other. This time, there were no interruptions, no alarms to break the moment. Their lips met in a soft, tender kiss that held the promise of a future neither of them could have imagined just days ago. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia rested her forehead against Jack's, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what true strength looks like. For helping me find the courage to do what's right." Jack smiled, his heart full to bursting. "Thank you," he replied, "for seeing me. Really seeing me, when no one else did." As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the windows of Stonebridge Enterprises, Jack and Olivia stood hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges the new day might bring. They had uncovered the truth, brought a corrupt empire to its knees, and in the process, had found something neither of them had been looking for, a love that transcended class and circumstance, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and the unshakable belief that one person, no matter how seemingly insignificant, could make a difference in the world. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Maxwell Stonebridge's arrest made headlines across the country, sending shockwaves through the business world. As promised, he cooperated fully with the authorities, his confession and the mountain of evidence provided by Jack and Olivia ensuring that justice would be served. Stonebridge Enterprises underwent a massive restructuring, with Olivia at the helm. She was determined to transform the company into a force for good, using its resources to right the wrongs of the past and create opportunities for those who had been overlooked and undervalued for far too long. Jack, for his part, found himself thrust into a world he had never imagined he'd be a part of. At Olivia's insistence, he took on a leadership role in the company's new community outreach program, using his unique perspective and experiences to ensure that Stonebridge Enterprises truly served all members of society, not just the wealthy and powerful. Their story captured the public's imagination, becoming a symbol of hope and redemption in a world that often seemed dominated by greed and corruption. Jack and Olivia were invited to speak at universities, conferences, and even before Congress, sharing their experiences and advocating for corporate responsibility and ethical business practices. But despite the whirlwind of their new lives, Jack and Olivia never forgot where they came from or the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. They made it a point to visit the old apartment building where Jack had lived, setting up scholarship programs for the residents and working to improve living conditions in the neighborhood. On a warm summer evening, about a year after the night that had changed everything, Jack and Olivia found themselves back where it all began, the janitor's closet on the 30th floor of Stonebridge Enterprises. "Do you ever miss it?" Olivia asked softly, running her hand along the worn handle of a mop. "The simplicity of it all?" Jack chuckled, pulling her close. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that if I was still just pushing a mop, I might never have found the courage to talk to the beautiful, kind-hearted woman who changed my life." Olivia smiled, leaning into his embrace. "And I might never have seen past my own privilege to recognize the incredible man right in front of me." As they stood there, surrounded by the tools of Jack's former trade, they were struck by how far they had come and how much they had overcome. Their journey had been one of transformation, not just of a company or of their circumstances, but of themselves. Jack Thompson, once an invisible janitor, had become a respected leader and advocate for social change. Olivia Stonebridge, once a sheltered heiress, had become a force for good in the business world, using her position and resources to make a real difference in people's lives. But more than that, they had found in each other a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity. They had proven that true connection could transcend class, background, and circumstance, that what truly mattered was the content of one's character and the courage to stand up for what was right. As they left the janitor's closet hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold, Jack and Olivia knew that their story was far from over. They had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds to bring a corrupt empire to its knees, but their greatest adventure, building a life together and using their influence to create positive change in the world, was just beginning. Their tale would be told for years to come, a modern-day fable of love, integrity, and the power of the human spirit to triumph over adversity. It served as a reminder that sometimes, the most unlikely heroes could be found in the most unexpected places, even pushing a mop in the halls of power. And so, as the sun set over the Chicago skyline, casting a golden glow over the city they had helped to transform, Jack and Olivia looked to the future with hope and determination. They had discovered a truth that had brought an empire to its knees, but more importantly, they had discovered the truth about themselves and the incredible potential that lay within each of them. Their journey had begun with humiliation and despair, but it had led them to a place of love, purpose, and the unshakable belief that one person, or two people united in a common cause, could indeed change the world. As they walked out of Stonebridge Enterprises, no longer the janitor and the heiress, but partners in every sense of the word, Jack and Olivia knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. And they were ready to face them, together.